The topic for today is what can you do with a doctorate? And obviously it's a big topic, right? There's no one answer to this question. And each of you come with a different background and different experience and a different discipline and different goals and different ideals about what the future looks like. But what we're going to try to do today is to create a structure or a system that hopefully provides you with a solid foundation for answering this question, because no one can answer this question for you. No one should tell you, or you should definitely do this with a doctorate, because they don't know you as well as you know yourself, and you may not know yourself as well as you can know yourself moving forward. And so we'll touch on all of these different aspects as we go through this. But I want to make sure that you sort of leave today not with an answer to this question, but with a system in place or a structure or process that allows you to answer this question in a way that's going to be satisfying to you and your own process moving forward. I am Dr. Joseph Barber. I'm the Director of Graduate Career Initiatives here at Penn Career Services. The main question I think that we can sort of start off with is an important one, right? So why did you want a doctoral degree to begin with? Because to a certain extent, some of your motivation behind getting the degree may help you figure out what comes next. And on the other end of that sort of continuum, the doctoral experience and then the postdoctoral experience, that's a whole sort of, up to about 10 years plus of time that you are going through, whereby what you wanted at the beginning of this process may be very different from what you want at the end of the process, right? You have changed, your life situation has changed, your knowledge of the world around you has changed. All of those things can affect what you do with a doctoral degree. And it's important to bear that in mind, because it's okay to change, right? It's okay to come in with a goal and change that goal and iterate on that goal moving forward. That's better than sort of just being stuck with one single vision about what this degree can give you and what you can do with it moving forward. Now, for some of you, you've come in with a doctoral degree very focused on becoming a faculty member, becoming a professor, staying within higher education in academia. And I think that's a perfectly fantastic goal to have. And at Career Services, we can support all students and postdocs as they are applying for faculty roles. We can look through your application materials. We can help you with mock interviews. We can help you negotiate. We can help you figure out how to network professionally within the academic setting. So if that's a path that you really do want to prioritize, then that's great. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. It's a perfectly good path that's out there. However, there are some sort of realities that I think are important to bear in mind about the academic job path. And these are just a few of some of the challenges that you may have already faced as you are thinking about possible future career paths. One is that there are just a limited number of places where you can be a professor in your field that are open every year for you moving forward, right? So there's only a certain number of roles in the field in different areas. And so you may not get to have a geographical preference about where you work. You may need to sort of shift and move your entire existence to another place, which as an undergraduate, is probably much easier to do than when you are a postdoc, for example, where you may have entanglements, a significant other, children, school districts, things like that. For some fields, and this is sort of very relevant to the humanities, there are just such a limited number of roles that are out there that you can apply to each year that are full-time tenure-track positions, right? And so that's going to limit the number of people who get jobs and limit the number of opportunities that you have to apply for those. That's going to be important. For many people, especially those who are postdocs now, the postdoc opportunity is a great sort of a transition period, but it's not a full-time role, right? You're not a postdoc for life. You are a postdoc, and that helps you get to the next role. And the same, to a certain extent, with a visiting assistant professor position. There are many of these are out there, and they can be helpful, but they require you to immediately start looking for the next role as soon as you have those to a certain extent. And then what people, I think, find very challenging about the academic job market is that you never quite know why people get the job and why people don't. It's a very opaque process. It's not just about publications, it's not just about funding, it's not just about who your advisor is and what your topic is. There are lots of different elements that go along with that, and that can feel frustrating. So with this sort of all in mind, what I will always say to someone who's interested in a faculty role is there's nothing wrong with it, knowing what your options are, right? Knowing what else that's out there. And so, I pitch that as for people who are primarily interested in the faculty role in terms of what else you can do. However, this is sort of a more sort of pertinent question, I think. Are you currently in a PhD program or in a postdoc because at some point you said to yourself, I don't know what I want, but a PhD sounds great, or maybe I'll continue on because my undergraduate advisor suggested that I take a PhD, which is what happened to me. Take a PhD, they said. I was like, that sounds great. I'd love to be called a doctor. And that was, my driving motivation at that point in time. If you weren't sure coming into your program, you still may not be sure right now. And so you may put your hypothetical hand up in the air if this is you. And what I would say to you is welcome to the majority, right? This is actually what most doctoral students and postdocs are feeling right now. I think many people feel like other people have it all sorted out and they know what's going on and they know what they're going to do next. And that is totally not true. The majority of people in a doctoral program are still exploring. They're still finalizing their plans. How do I know that? Well, I know that because it was my experience. That's an N of 1. But I also know it because of all the 13 programs that we have this week. This workshop is the most popular. Most people registered for this workshop than any other program, right? So you're all here because you share that common experience. And it's not a negative experience. It's a very positive opportunity to say, well, what can I do about that? So this is why we're going to be focusing on this as a topic today. Now, obviously, in the world of work, there are some roles that are directly connected to the PhD. If you want to be a chemical scientist, then a PhD in chemistry is going to be a direct connection. So it's not in academia, it's not a faculty role, it's in industry, there's a direct connection. You don't really have to think too hard about connecting the dots between that, because your research skills are going to be very much the thing that you are highlighting and selling, and that will bring value to the role. But there are many roles that are sort of somewhat indirectly connected to a PhD. And so all I did yesterday was I did a search using PhD as a keyword on LinkedIn, and these are some of the things that popped up, right? So a medical writing fellowship for PhDs. Now, medical writing requires you to have knowledge of a broad range of science, but it's not necessarily specific to the science that you've done as part of your PhD, right? So the PhD has given you maturity understanding the subject, but that's what you bring with you, that knowledge area. The Diversity Inclusion Program Manager also asked for a PhD or potentially PhD preferred. And the reason there is because the PhD has given you, and the postdoc has given you, such clear insight about some of the challenges of higher education, right? You've existed in all spectrums, potentially undergrad, master's, PhD, postdoc, right? You've seen everything, the good and the bad. And for someone to be able to connect with faculty and administrators, that PhD experience gives you a lot of value. The PhD network planning and operations role is very much like my role. It's a career services related role whereby they are looking to build connections between the PhD population and employers and other departments, right? So it's very much a role that requires you to understand what is valuable about a PhD and talk about that. The education specialist faculty instructor, looking for PhDs or EDDs as we think about the broader doctoral population. This is about creating teaching mechanisms to help medical information be transferred appropriately to different populations. Associate editor, again, just knowing how to communicate effectively and knowing the science are two different skills that are combined together. A social science program supervisor at the state of Missouri. So again, the idea is that social science and the research that you've been doing as a social scientist can be applied in very direct ways. And this is what that role is looking for. And then this startup opportunity here. So seeking PhD graduates for opportunities in our study startup regulatory submissions group, a great opportunity to enter the clinical research industry. So again, it's not going to be connected to, in this role, the research that you've done, but it's connected to the sphere in which your research is done and the way that you think about that research in broader terms. All of these value a PhD in different ways. Now, the key part to this sort of job search is, yes, they say a PhD is valuable. Yes, they say a PhD is preferred. But just because they say that doesn't mean that you want that role, right? You have a PhD or you will have a PhD. It doesn't mean that it's going to be the best fit for you. It also doesn't mean that right now you have all of the relevant skills and experiences and knowledge to do that, because they will ask for something more than just having a PhD, right? They'll be looking for skills that can be directly applied in different ways. And so right now, you may not have those things, but this is an opportunity as you find things that you are interested in to say, if these are paths that are valuable to me, how can I gain those skills and experiences that will be helpful to me moving forward? So that's a key aspect of that. There's a temporal component to this, right? Right now, you may not know, right now, you may not have the skills, but you can. Now, I share this diagram not because I think it's the clearest way of thinking about career exploration. In fact, it seems kind of scary from afar, but I've shared a link in the resources that I put into the chat, and I'll put them in again there in case new people don't have access to those, so that you can read the article that sort of connects to this. All of this does is sort of expand on the main steps that you're going to take to understand yourself and understand what opportunities that are out there. And it sort of walks you through some of the process that you can use to do that. So don't sort of don't be scared off by the the graveyard at the top that says gravestone and RIP, but think about this as sort of a guided process to help you understand and explore the options that are out there. For today, I think we can simplify this to a slightly different set of questions that seem less scary, right? And these are the questions that I sort of came up with that I thought would be helpful. Right now, what are your current skill and knowledge assets? And all I mean by that is, what are the things that you do well? What are the things that you know, right? And we'll talk about how to sort of break that down. Right now, given a choice, if you could choose which career to go into, what would you choose, right? And again, for many of you, that might be, I would really love to be in a faculty role. There just aren't any opportunities there. But what are the next steps beyond that, right? What are the other things that you know about? And that's something to think about. Number 3 here, given that you have a choice or you have a sort of a preference right now for certain paths, are there opportunities right now in those paths? And have you seen other PhDs go into that? So we'll talk about how to do that. And then what do you need to be competitive? We'll cover that right at the end. These are the 4 questions that I think can help you answer the question, what can you do with a doctoral degree? And so we're going to walk through steps and resources that will help you answer some of these questions. On the Career Services website, on the PhD community page or the PhD and postdoc community page, we've broken it down into these 4 categories, right? Reflect and explore your options, network, gain experience, and then make decisions. Networking will be part of this, and we'll talk about how to make that a little bit less scary today, but also there are a couple of sessions on this tomorrow that will help you. And so I encourage you to sort of not sort of balk at the idea that engaging with people is going to be challenging, because there are different ways of doing that. We'll talk about sort of both passive and active networking approaches that you can use. So as we think about then the reflecting, this is understanding yourself, because if you have a firm understanding of what it is that you do well, you're going to have a much better opportunity to say, well, where can I use these types of skills that are out there? I share these questions because I think they're very helpful. And I also think they're questions that people don't often have or haven't spent time reflecting on as part of their PhD or postdoc experience. I mean, people get swept up into these programs and doing the research that sometimes you don't take time to reflect to see what's going on. And that self-reflection is actually a really important part of the process. Thinking about your knowledge, what are you an expert in? And I sort of want to flag here this idea of what are you an expert in? Because sometimes I ask this question to people and they say, well, I'm not an expert. I don't have expertise in anything, as if expertise is sort of this very thin layer of knowledge or skills right at the top of a giant chart of things that you have, right? And so what I would like you to sort of re-envision is that expertise is something that you do actually have. Your research is specific to you, and the skills that you are bringing to your research are unique to you in many cases. And so you do have expertise, and that expertise is something that you need to lean into a little bit more as part of this process. No one is an expert at everything, or no one is the most expert in anything. And so you are as expert in a field as other people are out there. So try to embrace this idea that you do have expertise, because it's important to sort of to begin to create narratives about the value that you bring. What are positive words other people use to describe you? This is important because sometimes it's very hard for people to come up with those words themselves, because higher education, academia, the PhD and postdoc process doesn't have a lot of positive reinforcement, right? Your PI never really comes to you and says, wow, what great job you're doing today, right? What you tend to get from being in academia is publications that are rejected or funding applications that don't quite make it, and they give you critical feedback. And that's great, but positive feedback is going to make you more optimistic about the process. So ask the people around you, how would you describe me? And then use that as the cornerstone of how you want to describe yourself. This last one here, what are some of your broader knowledge areas? This is also important because this helps you break down what might be a very specific research project that you are working on and broaden it out into the broad range of skills that you have moving forward. My PhD research was on chickens. I studied the social facilitation of laying hens, which is a very, very, very small aspect of zoology of animal behavior. And chickens is a narrow field in general terms, which is why throughout the entire of my PhD and probably for about 3 years afterwards, every gift I received from someone was a chicken themed, right? People will immediately begin to sort of pigeonhole you, chickenhole you, whatever the word is, into that realm. So yes, that's what my thesis was. But as I sort of expand out on what that gave me insight into, on the right-hand side are all the things that are connected to this. I'm not These aren't things that I studied a lot necessarily. These aren't things that I did my research on, but I knew about them. I could have a conversation about them, and I had an interest in them. So everything on the right there is relevant. Now, for the job that I'm in right now, being a career advisor at Penn, one of the things that they were looking for was someone who was, familiar with the STEM field. Animal behavior and chickens is a very, very small area of STEM, but it doesn't matter. It's still in that STEM field. So suddenly I leveraged that as I was applying for this role. Statistical analysis is something that I did, but every time I did it, I really hated it. And so, yes, I could leverage that skill. I could use that skill. I could talk about it. It's not something I really want to see in my job full time, but I have an understanding of it, right? So this is something that you can do too, and I encourage you to do with your research. You can do it by yourself. You can try to do it with a pair of people because it's much easier then. But begin to break down your research into skills, knowledge areas, things that are connected to it. And you'll see that you'll start generating a wide range of keywords that are connected to you. Now, those are keywords that you can throw into a job engine as you start looking for jobs, or that you can begin to integrate into your own narratives as you begin to apply for things. A really important sort of process that I think is helpful. Now, it's helpful as well because if you look at a job board, right, maybe you're doing a PhD in medieval history. I did medieval as a keyword on LinkedIn, 76 results. And then I did a history one, and there's like 400,000 results, right? Now, not all of those are going to be relevant or things that you want to do. But if you begin to sort of narrow down your sort of field too soon in this process, you'll find that there's fewer doors to sort of explore or doors to open as part of this process. So broadening is a really great way of answering the question, what can I do with my doctoral degree? Because it gives you more insight into how it can be applied. And what I would also encourage you to do is come to Career Services and chat with us about your breakdown. This is who I am. This is the keywords that I associate with me. We can give you feedback on that. We can demonstrate how to use some of those keywords and how to talk about those elements moving forward. So we are open all summer long, limited time sometimes because we have our own conferences, but you can always find us and look for the same day advising if you don't find an appointment as well, because we usually have those every day. Now, there are other tools out there that I encourage you to use, right? The Career Explorer tool is a free tool on the Career Services website because we pay for it so that you have access to it. It's not going to transform your understanding of yourself, because all these tools tend to do is they take the information that you are giving them and they give you back a version of yourself that you perhaps haven't yet considered, right? So based on my input, it's saying being a professor, an art teacher, a zoo educator are, there are more beyond these ones, but are some of the fields that I could go into. I did work in the zoo field. I am an adjunct professor, and I like to be creative, although I'm terrible at drawing, so perhaps the art teacher is not the best one there. But the idea is it's reflecting my own skill sets here. Now, the great thing about the Career Explorer platform is it also has these reports that give you slightly more detailed information about how your skills and experiences connect together, right? So being a groundbreaker, what does it actually mean? And what it's trying to tell me there in terms of what I circled here, what do you gravitate towards in terms of working styles? Because that's important too. The type of working style that you gravitate towards can be something you look for in a role, so that you're making sure that you're leveraging your skills and experiences, perhaps in different ways, but still aligned with how you want to do that, right? So that's going to be important. Again, these are really great tools to sort of reflect upon the skills that you have. More targeted tools that are specific to doctoral students and postdocs would be the MyIDP tool, generally primarily focused perhaps on the biomedical sciences, also the ChemIDP tool for physical scientists and the chemistry field. This is a tool I've talked about before, and it's a complicated tool. Well, not complicated. It's a multi-layered tool because it has both assessment tools and a sort of a library or a database of paths that are connected with that, and an individual development plan where you can begin to set for yourself a plan moving forward. Now, based on the statistics, what I can tell you is that most people come and use this tool to do the self-assessment. They do not stick around to do the individual development plan because that's hard. And it's hard to sort of make that a reality in terms of what's going on. But it's okay to use sort of the first part of this tool moving forward. Now, this tool works in terms of assessments by breaking it down into skills, interests, and values. And they gives you the opportunity to do sort of 1 to 5 Likert scales and all these different elements here. These are skills. These are things that you have or don't have so much in terms of proficiency. Interests. How often would you like to be doing these things? If it's statistical analyses, it's like 0 for me. If it's coming up with ideas for research, it's like 5. So these are important things to know about yourself. And then values, right? And values are changeable. At the beginning of your PhD, your values may be different from now, where you may have 2 children and a partner and a house. and your values have changed, right? Or they may have stayed the same. It's, you know, your values are your own to have, but they are changeable, and they are important to sort of some of the next steps that you might have. Now, what the tool does with this is it combines your results with a library of data about different career paths, whereby experts from these different career paths say, these are the skills that I have, and these are the interests that I have. And then what this tool does is it does a basic matching between your skills and interests and what experts say. So you can see here, based on science writing, my rating in terms of broad knowledge of science is a 2, but experts say, well, you need, you know, in my role, I have a broad knowledge of science. So there's a mismatch there, not an obstacle or not a barrier, but just something to be aware of in terms of if I was interested in this field. So based on all of that, as a scientist, I can see all of these paths that could be connected to, you know, my skills and interests. It's not saying I should do these. It's not saying I want to do these. It's saying this is where my skills and interests overlap. It's also not saying that there are different niches within all these different fields that you can explore further, but it is an important part of the process moving forward. So I could be all these things, but do I actually want to be those things? That's a key question next. And do I currently have the skills to do all those things? That's next part of the process. Now, not to leave the doctoral students in humanities and social sciences out, very similar tool. Again, Imagine PhD and the MyDP tools, they're all free to access, and we encourage you to do that in your own time. But there's an assessment tool as part of Imagine PhD. It follows much the same process. So here are interests. I would never like to do this. I would always like to do this, right? So you can match those. For the skills, it's a little bit more fancy than the MyDP tools. You get to drag and drop all of these different skills. This is research and analysis skills into I've never done this and I can do this well. And you can do this for skills, research, oral, written, management, leadership, technical, to create this nice mosaic of things that you do well and things that you've never done. And just because you've never done it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you haven't had the opportunity or the need to or the want to do that moving forward. So again, these tools begin to paint a picture for you. And in this tool, they overlap that with some of the common career paths taken by people in the humanities and social sciences, these job families, including the faculty path, right? This is not distinct by any means from these other job families. It's part of that same range of opportunities that you can explore. And it's the same process here too. You get to match with your skills and your interests to different populations, and it shows you where there's a great match with a star, and it shows you where there's not such a great match with a slightly pointier star. I didn't count all the points today, but you can see that it's pointing out where there may be something to focus on as you are thinking about whether this is a good fit, or as you're thinking about, you know, do I have the skills necessary for this type of role moving forward? And can I build those skills moving forward? So do I want to travel? No. So in terms of interest comparisons, some types of consulting are not going to be of interest to me. Some consulting firms don't travel though, right? So again, there's more to explore there moving forward. Now, all of those tools that I've just mentioned are great, but they are really require you to have a lot of proactive self-guidance in this process, right? You have to be the one to sort of look at all the different materials and add in all the information. What I want to sort of point you towards as a great addition to this, not a replacement, but addition to this, is this Aurora platform that we brought on, I think it was last year, which is custom built for doctoral students and postdocs as a guided resource, right? So it's a combination of both online videos, interviews with PhDs, workbooks, and worksheets. And you know, I really encourage you to sort of leverage this tool because it has this nice integrated curriculum to it. So we've been talking about know your options and talking about different ways of doing that. You can see the different lessons on the right-hand side here match what I've just been talking about in terms of transferable skills, values, and interests, and what will the world pay you to do, right? These are topics that we are covering today. All of these are captured in videos in this Aurora platform. More than that, they're also echoed by the steps and the activities and the exercises in the workbooks that go along with that. So you can see, again, the interest values on the table of contents around page 20 and 19. These are sort of helpful hints about how to do this moving forward. So, you know, in terms of the things that you do well, they have a spreadsheet, they have a video, they have the workbook to help you do this. So yes, we can help you do this at Career Services in one-on-one appointments. Our appointments are limited by the sheer range of people that we work with, but this self-guided resource can be so helpful. And these are just examples from the workbooks then of some of those exercises, right? In terms of breaking down the work that you do into skills, thinking about the interests that you're able to pursue during your degree and why those are important to you, Thinking about where your energy lies in terms of the skills and experiences that you want to bring to bear, right? What gives you energy as you're thinking about work, and those values too, right? Beginning to list those and visualize those is so important. If it's all in your head and you sort of just thinking about it in general terms, it can get very muddled very quickly. This is a much better way of really beginning to verbalize in writing, writalize, whatever the word is, that information so that you can get it out there. So this really then is a combination of reflecting and gathering information, right? It's reflecting and exploring options internally, and then you're going to use some of that information to then explore options that align with what you've learned about yourself. So given what you know about these things, who wants your skills? Who wants the things that you can bring? And do you have the skills that employers are looking for? Now, in the Aurora workbook, they've sort of framed this optimal career pathway with these three overlapping circles. What do you love? What are you good at? And what will the world pay you to do? And I think this is a nice way of doing that. In the middle of this is the optimal career pathway, which is different from your optimal job, because your first job isn't likely to be optimal in many different ways, but it will be one of several steps that get you closer to something that you think you want to be. And I think that's important too, is it's a pathway. There will be change along that as you learn about different opportunities, as you come across different employers. So thinking about it as a pathway as opposed to the perfect job, I think is going to be much more viable moving forward. Now, the questions I'm going to go into slightly more detail in now are, what do you love and what will the world pay you to do? Because I think what you're good at, that's an easy question to answer. You just have to spend some time reflecting. What do you love? I think is really hard. I have a hard time answering that if someone says, what type of ice cream do you like? What is your best flavor? It's like, I don't know. I like lots of different things. So it's a hard question to sort of break down by itself. So we'll think about how to answer that. And then what will the world pay you to do? If you don't know what you want or don't know what the jobs are, that can be hard to answer as well. So let's think about what that looks like by framing these questions slightly differently. So rather than what do you love, what do other people like you love? That's an easier question to answer, because then you can reflect on what they say. And again, rather than what will the world pay you to do, what does the world pay other people to do? And we can get to that question and see how to answer that. So what do other people love? Let's think about what that can look like. In the Aurora platform, they have a video library where they've interviewed doctoral students, sometimes ABD, alumni or doctoral alumni, postdoctoral alumni, and in their current roles, and they've asked some questions about how they got there and what that looks like. And there's about 150 plus of these video interviews that you can peruse through. And there's even a separate workbook for this video library so that you can take advantage of these videos. So rather than just watching the videos sort of passively, you can say, what can I gain from watching these videos? What can I learn from these people's experience by doing that? Now, the way that they've broken down this video library isn't by job title. And I think that's actually really smart, because in many cases, you won't know what the job titles mean or the employers do. What they've broken it down by are the values and interests that the people who are being interviewed have. So you don't even need to go in knowing what job you want necessarily, although consulting is sort of, as an example, a job category on the left-hand side, but most of the other things are not job types. They are competencies, they are skills, they're interests, right? So advocacy, if you're interested in that, then all of these people who are being interviewed here share something in common about what that looks like and feels like. And so by listening into those conversations, you can gain an understanding of that. If you're interested in writing and editing, again, a range of people, different backgrounds, different fields, and you can learn about what that looks like. Esther is actually one of my colleagues here at Penn Career Services, so it's nice to see her included in this as well. And if you're interested in finance and budget management, these are people who do a lot of that in their role there. So for all of these competencies, you can find someone to listen to who can share their expertise and insight into what they do now, what they did, and that really complicated part in the middle from getting to where they were to where they are now, right? So that's the bit, that tricky part in the middle is where you are all at in many cases. So hearing about their journeys is going to be very helpful. Now, from watching these videos, here are some of the questions that I would encourage you to try to answer so that you are taking advantage of, the resources, right? In their current role, how did they know that this was a good fit, right? That certainty of saying, is this really what I want to do, is a really great thing to sort of look for as you're thinking about, their experience. As they talk about what they do right now, listen to the skills that they use, right? Those are skills that you would need, or that you'd need to talk about if that was a role that you wanted to go into. What are some of the challenges that they face in that role in terms of the work challenges, in terms of work-life challenges? They're not going to talk too much about challenges, but they will talk about some of the realities of the role that are going to be important to listen to. And then perhaps most importantly, how did they find out about it? Because again, that's where many of you will be, is how did they know that this existed? How did they come across it? How did they gain experience that was helpful to them? So listen to the videos, but also take note of some of these prompts here, because I think that will help you make the most out of it. Passive networking is fantastic, especially if you don't really like the idea of networking, because you don't have to find these people, you don't have to talk to these people, you just have to listen. The challenge with that, obviously, is that you don't actually get your questions answered, and the people that you're listening to may not be the most relevant people to you. So active networking, where you are finding people and you get to ask your questions, is going to be more productive. You can move through both of these phases, you can alternate, it's perfectly fine, but the active networking is going to be a key part of this process of determining what it is that you actually love. Because if you can speak to someone and ask them questions that are relevant to you and say, I like this, I do this well, are these things that you do well, and do you like that? That's going to be a productive conversation, not just that part, those questions, but a productive conversation as part of your outreach to different people out there. Tomorrow, as part of this expanded job search prep camp, we have a couple of sessions on networking. Do take advantage of those if you want to get some tips on that. Now, let me do a pitch for the benefits of networking, because primarily networking is research and information gathering. It's answering your questions. And if you have a set of questions, then making sure that you find good answers to those questions is going to position yourself much more effectively for being confident about next steps. So all of these answers here, all of this information is going to be valuable. What is additionally valuable is practicing talking about yourself, practicing highlighting the things that you do well, and practicing creating narratives that might be applied differently, and also helping other people. All of those things are great and optimistic and energizing and reinforcing in a positive way. And so even though it might feel challenging to begin with, to start, connect with us at Career Services. We can help you get started, and you too can find some value in this experience. Back to our other question then. What will the world pay me to do? Or what has the world paid other people like me to do? Now, some of this information can be gleaned fairly straightforwardly in terms of the data that's out there. So for example, at Career Services, we do a career plan survey, a first destination survey for all graduating students, undergraduates all the way up to PhDs. And the data that we collect in terms of the responses that we get, we share as part of our career plan survey data on our website. So you can access this. There may be a couple of new people who've come in. So let me just put in my resources in the chat again. This is where all of the resources that I'm mentioning today will be captured. So these are data points that you can take a look at that just say, what are the first roles that people have taken beyond Penn? And we do a follow-up survey for sort of 6 months post-graduation. And the data sort of oftentimes look like this, right? Different programs, different degrees, and where people are in terms of their role and the organization. So a really fantastic way of gaining a better understanding of some of the options that are out there in terms of organizations, but also knowing where the common or the well-trodden paths are already, right? If another PhD is in this role, this organization, then that organization already knows the value of someone with a PhD in that role. And so they may be open and looking for eagerly more people like that to fill the roles that they have. Now, many of the positions, there'll be faculty positions, some of them will be postdoc positions, depending on the field. So a range of things that are out there. But you can go back 5 years or so and look at those data and just see in aggregate what those paths are. Obviously, LinkedIn is a much stronger tool because people can't come back and update the career plan survey data. It's a point-in-time data. But LinkedIn, people like to update their profile all the time. That's going to give you real-time understanding of what's going on, right? So for the University of Pennsylvania school page, there's 191,000 alumni and current students who have LinkedIn profiles. Now, I appreciate that as a postdoc, you are not officially a Penn alum, but you can access this just as well as a PhD student. I'm not a Penn alum. I can access this. You can access any school page in the same way. And being a postdoc doesn't really make you distinct from being a Penn alum or a Penn student. You can still leverage the fact that you are at Penn as you are engaging with this network. So don't let that be an obstacle to you. This tool is great. It breaks down and allows you to search through and filter out across all of these different dimensions, where they live, where they work, what they do, what they studied. Now, what they studied isn't a direct match to what people study at Penn. There's a tool that LinkedIn uses across all academic institutions. So you may have to find a couple of options that are like yours, but it gives you a sense of what people might, in different backgrounds might be doing in the world of work right now. So as an example, if I look at, so we take our 191,000 on the left-hand side, and then I filter it by they studied anthropology and they're working in program and project management. Then you can see the organizations have changed. Where they work has changed to reflect the different places that they are. Microsoft, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the Avengers. Sounds exciting. I may have to look up that one after this session, which differs from the employers in the general alumni category on the left. Again, English language and literature. People with that background, again, undergraduate, master's, PhD, doesn't make a difference from LinkedIn's perspective, who are in consulting roles. And again, you can see some fairly familiar consulting companies on the right, familiar to some people. You might explore them yourself if you haven't come across that. And then the other day I came across, so if you filter on those different things and then you scroll down on this list, you can see who those people are, right? So here are my consulting people with a background in English and literature, right, in different ways. And you can see who they are, you can see when they graduated, you can see how you're connected, you can see the role that they're in, all great information. Now, your job here is not to connect with these people, it's to sort of explore them at this point in time. This was the post I was just referencing just a second ago. This came up on my LinkedIn feed the other day from Sarah. She posted that she's starting a new position as a communications specialist at McKinsey. She comes with a background in a PhD in English. And so, again, it's a great way of exploring options by sort of living through other people's lives and seeing how they got to that point in time and what that looks like from their experience and how you can sort of leverage a similar pathway or a similar approach moving forward. Now, ideally, what you're trying to do with all those people that you might be finding is starting a conversation. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because that's more of our networking aspect, but I do want to touch on a couple of key things that are important before you do that. Because as you are reaching out to people to understand their paths, it's really helpful to have a foundational knowledge of career paths already. So if you want to connect with Sarah in consulting, probably you should understand the nature of consulting as an industry and the nature of consulting jobs before you have that conversation, so that you're not asking basic questions in a situation where you might be able to ask more meaningful questions, right? So these first-hand Vault guides have nice industry breakdowns, consulting jobs, law jobs, nonprofit jobs, that give you some foundational knowledge that you can leverage as you are having conversations with people in the real world. So I do encourage you to do your background research first before you connect with people in the real world. And there are plenty of places to look for that. If you're a biology background, you can use the iBiology tool, another free tool. They have a whole set of videos on career exploration, and that's going to be a great way of sort of gaining up speed on policy, on other types of science education that's out there, just making sure that you have that foundational knowledge. But, and here's another sort of key element that I think is really important when it comes to networking. If you're just reaching out to people and having conversations, but don't have a system to sort of capture that information, you're going to get overwhelmed pretty quickly. If it's all up in your head, it can feel, every conversation you had sort of adds to the complexity of issues in your mind. And so what I would really encourage you to do is think about how can you structure your process so that you can collect the data on different careers in a meaningful way so that you can see it in real world, in an Excel spreadsheet or on pieces of paper, whatever it looks like for you, but so that you can track your progress. Track your progress so that you can reward yourself for actually making progress, but also track your progress so you can come back to that information and say, well, what have I learned? What do I still have questions about? How can I, take advantage of this connection that I made here to help me understand this other thing that I have questions about? So what does that look like in terms of, how you can structure it? Well, again, on the Aurora platform, they have a whole set of information about how you can structure your interactions in terms of networking, in terms of researching, connecting, reflecting on the data that you're having. So using this as this platform as a great tool is going to be helpful as well, but it can just be an Excel spreadsheet at the same time, right? And so, as you are gathering information on employers, or job titles, or skills that are important from the videos that you've watched, or the conversations that you have, or contacts that you found on LinkedIn or other databases that you can make, just keep track of it. And then every empty cell is an action item. Here's something I don't know. Here's something I need to find out more about, right? So it's really great. And then you can bring this and you can bring it to career services. And you can say, this is what I've done, and this is where I'm stuck, and this is where I'm more confused than I was, right? And we can help you identify then strategies that are connected to that. I have touched on a way to sort of leverage LinkedIn and this other tool called Career Shift in a separate video. So again, that video link is in the list of links that I put in the chat for you, so you can take a look at that in your own time. So where are we so far in this, answering this big, broad, what can I do with a doctoral degree workshop? Hopefully you've seen that answering questions about your own skills and interests is valuable and fairly straightforward. The idea of finding out about different paths that are out there by reflecting what other people love and what other people do is a great way of beginning to say, well, what would I, what might I like to do if I had the choice, right? So listening to other people talk about their choices gives you insight in what that looks like. Looking at the data about where people have gone, where do people actually have jobs? What jobs are posted right now? Even if you're not looking for jobs, what's posted right now on the LinkedIn jobs board or on the Handshake jobs board in terms of position, right? That's going to give you data about the likelihood of there being opportunities to apply for. And then this last point here, what do you need to do to be competitive is a sort of another aspect of what you need to be thinking about. And this introduces us to our sort of career engagement continuum. All of these things can be important. You don't have to do all of them, but they all can be helpful at creating a narrative that says, I'm interested in and I can do the thing that I'm now going to be applying for, or that in the future you may be applying for. Online research, so important. Chatting with people who do it, so important. These are things that we've been touching on in terms of gathering that information. On Handshake, there are employer information sessions throughout the year, but especially during the academic semesters, where you can sit in and listen to recruiters and people from different industries talk about what they're doing. They may not be targeted to you as a doctoral student, but you still may gain insight into the industry or the organization by sitting in, even if it's undergraduate focused. So where you do have time and where it does overlap with your interests, this is a great place to sort of gather information about opportunities on the Handshake events tab, where you can look for these information sessions. Career fairs coming in September. We have a whole bunch of career fairs, from a general one to an engineering one to a biosciences one to a virtual government and nonprofit one. In most cases, these are both in-person and virtual. Fingers crossed that both works out. Again, you don't have to be looking for a job to go to a career fair, speak with an employer, and learn about the opportunities that they have. So do take advantage of these. The virtual sessions have group sessions that you can sit in on and scheduled one-on-one times. The in-person one gives you the opportunity to make an actual connection with someone who might be able to connect you with someone else. Even if they're there to hire undergraduates, they probably also know who at their organization works with advanced degree holders, right? So great opportunities. All of these fairs are open to undergraduates, all the postdocs and alumni. We encourage you to take advantage of those. Job simulations are another way of sort of gaining insight, right? You may not be able to do an internship or a fellowship, but you can certainly find experiences beyond that, right? So the Intersect Job Simulations website has a bunch of resources for doctoral students and postdocs to get a very small taste of different career options that are out there, right? So these are things that have been created by people who work in these roles as exercises, self-guided exercises that you can do to see if you enjoy it, to see if you feel like this would be something that you'd like to do more of, all right? And they're broken down into different categories here: business and data and entrepreneurship, journalism, medical writing, all these different things that you might say, well, what does it actually look like or feel like to do these types of sessions? Public health, science outreach. So a really great way of just delving in and looking, right? You don't even have to do them. You can just look to get a sense of what that feels like. Now, taking it to the next level, we have platforms like MindSumo, which actually have competitions and financial incentives to getting involved in projects. So the challenges that they sort of frame up can be broken down by the categories on the left: engineering, computer science, math, sciences, humanities, and arts. And these are just examples of projects that you can get involved with to see if you can sharpen your skills that you already have, or see if some of these projects are of interest to you. And the money award, may not even be important to you, as opposed to sort of the process of going through that. So that's one aspect. Forage is another platform that we encourage people to take a look at. There's no financial incentives here, but what these are real world case studies or examples of what it is to actually do a job, where there's a combination of videos and resources and exercises that you can go through for different fields that are out there. Very much, again, self-guided, but there's a lot of resources that support these different exercises that are out there. These are consulting ones. that you might get a sense of. So if you're interested in data science or other aspects of consulting, you can take a look at those. This is a marketing one. And then these are law ones, that are connected to law in some way, all of which give you insight into what these organizations do in terms of what these roles look like. And you can access those for free to take a look at those new programs. So you can see that there's an hour commitment to it. So that hour, or the hours that they have, are associated with the projects that you're doing, the videos that you're watching, the resources that you're reading, and everything that goes with that. So quite a great immersive experience that you can take advantage of. Don't overlook on-campus groups as a great way of gaining experience, but also building networks in terms of understanding different fields that are out there. The Penn Science Policy and Diplomacy Group is always active, always a great way for interest in policy, always a great way to find community of people who are also exploring different career fields that are out there. So that's an option. PPG Healthcare Consulting and the Penn Graduate Consulting Club, two graduate and postdoc level consulting clubs that many of you have already been involved with to give you a taste of consulting. The BPP, or the BPC rather, Biomedical Postdoctoral Committee, Council, I got it right, have a whole bunch of committees that you can take advantage of. And so if you wanted to go into science writing, for example, then the Editors Association might be a great way of demonstrating not only that you have the skills, also demonstrating that you have an interest in that field moving forward. So knowing that you're busy with your research, and busy with life, I know these other things are additional challenges to sort of add into your schedule, but they can be very insightful to clarify your own thinking and gain skills that are helpful to you. The last resource that I'll share with you, because I really want to reinforce this idea of Aurora being helpful, because it is such a guided, integrated curriculum approach to this process, is this video on how to use Aurora for exploring. So I just touch on a few things, just a quick 17-minute video, but then you could go and do all this stuff on Aurora yourself. Apparently I didn't get myself in the best shot there, but there you go.